Thank you for joining us for the Member Speaker Series. My name is Kate Gleason, and I'm the Membership Director here at the Garden. We have a great program today featuring Kevin and Jennifer Box, the artistic power couple behind our fantastic new exhibition, Origami in the Garden, which is now filling our landscape with 18 incredible origami sculptures. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our Santa Fe-based artists, Kevin and Jennifer Box, who are with us today. Born in Oklahoma, Kevin graduated from the School of Visual Arts in New York City. While still a student, Kevin took a meaningful trip to Greece that led to his transition from graphic art to metal casting and apprenticeships at foundries in Atlanta and Austin. His experiences at these art foundries enabled him to pioneer a unique process that transforms delicate paper into museum quality metals. From the beginning of his career, Kevin received recognition for his unique and refreshing style. In 2004, he was elected as the youngest member of the National Sculptors Guild and was recognized by Southwest Art Magazine as one of the top 21 artists under 31 in the Southwest. Today, Kevin's work can be found in museums, more than 20 public art collections, and hundreds of private art collections throughout the world. Kevin's wife, Jennifer Box, has started dancing at the age of 5. She trained under Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater and then received her bachelor and master's degrees from New York University in dance education and nonprofit administration. During her years as a dancer in New York, she performed, choreographed, and created some of her own costuming. In 2006, Jennifer and Kevin were married in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and soon began working together. In 2013, the pair created the original exhibition Origami in the Garden and many of the artworks within it. I'm so delighted to welcome Kevin and Jennifer today. We had hoped to do this last year before COVID in person with you all, but I'm excited to let them give us a glimpse of their life and their work in Santa Fe. So I will turn it over to them now. Thanks so much again for being here.
Hello from sunny Santa Fe. I'm here at our studio and sculpture garden that we live and work out of. This is the birthplace of Origami in the Garden. You can see we have a sculpture garden out there. I don't know how far into the distance you can see that, but we live and work here in a studio and home that we built in 2012. We have a number of staff members that work here part-time and full-time to help us make all these wonderful things come true. That's Jennifer's office up there, the little blue box in the air. And the rest of the studios are you're gonna see a little bit of them. This is our studio truck. We call it the crane truck for obvious reasons. We work at different scales and all kinds of different projects here. This is a big stone paper scissors. It's a rock paper scissors that actually is composed with a 2,500 pound boulder, if you can imagine. That's a beast. And I'm going to walk you into our fab shop here, where Eben is one of my lead friends and compadres in this process of fabrication. Say hello, Eben.
Hello.
Eben Markowski is a maestro of aluminum fabrication, which is a lot of what we're doing right now, working on another project that we're about to launch next year at Atlanta Botanical Garden. This is a butterfly that we are just finishing up today in very thin gauge aluminum that we are folding and cutting and welding. So most of the work that we do is cast. It's not necessarily folded metal like a lot of people think. We work with aluminum, bronze, and stainless steel. But the two most important things, and anytime I give a tour of the studio, I always talk about this. This is my sculpture kitchen, so to speak. And the two most important things that any artist has to do is start something from nothing and then finish it, right? So that's what we focus on. That's my primary role here in the studio. Whether it begins with a delicate piece of paper or, I'm bringing in other collaborators and origami artists to work on projects. It's always managing from where are we at in the process between starting something and finishing it. This is a little squirrel that Michael G. LaFosse folded and is now in bronze. We're doing some finishing on that. I'll show you the wax department. There's this little room here that opens up, and we have a turkey roaster in here, which is a very sophisticated device. They go on sale every November, which is great, but it's a common tool in a lot of bronze foundries or artists that work in bronze because the lost wax technique that we use. So whether we're starting with, you know, a paper crane or more complicated designs like this origami bison, the idea is I melt the wax down and engineer the paper using wax into a model that can then be molded and cast in the lost wax technique. Sometimes we'll digitally scan that model and enlarge it with clay, finishing it digitally with our fingertips. And sometimes we fabricate. So all of those decisions have to be made early on as to what this model lends itself to, what process is going to be used. We use a lot of subcontractors and foundries and fabricators around the world and outside of my studio, because those are very heavy industrial processes and we're just limited to the scale that we can actually achieve. I'm going to take you in to another room here. This is our design studio in here. So this is a little bit more of a clean room where we can work with some of the paper models and computers or contacts, info. We can finish things in here as well. Let's see if I can show you right next to me. Here's a little display of some original paper models by some of our collaborators that are protected. See, obviously origami is way too fragile for my taste. So even in my studio, we have them protected in glass boxes and cases so that we can look at them. And when we need to get into it, we can, you know, take them apart and dismantle them. Here's a really cool piece by Robert J. Lang that we're working on. This is what's called a kusudama. There's 30 uncut squares in this beautiful design here that we've been translating into metal. And here are some of the paper models of butterflies and different things that we're playing with. This is a metal, so this is one of our first prototypes of a metal butterfly that we're working on. Stay tuned. We're not done with Origami in the Garden. We've got cool things coming. So this is that aspect of the studio. We kind of have what we call multi-room schoolhouse, you know, where we play with different things. And then I'm gonna change the screen and just sort of show you as we move up top. We have a loft upstairs, and that blue office that I showed you is actually sort of extended out to the right. But this is where we have the administrative staff, which, as I like to say, for every creative action, there is an equal and opposite administrative reaction. This is Alley Cat, our wonderful office staff. She helps Jennifer manage a lot of the nitty-gritty details of edition numbers and inventory management. And so she gets this beautiful little office space up here. And then Jennifer has this wonderful door that closes, and I'm going to turn off my video and join her in her lair. I'll be right there.
And now we are actually in my office, and Kevin's going to be joining me. Hi, I'm Jennifer Box.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us.
Nice
You
meeting
too. And we put together a slideshow to show you a little bit of our background and history and the visuals. Hopefully are fun and stimulating as Kevin gets to tell a lot of the story of Origami in the Garden.
So I've been chosen as your designated speaker today, so I'm going to keep going here. And we're going to have a question and answer at the end so we can hear from Jennifer. And if anybody has questions, just write them down or send them in the feed, and we'll go ahead and get started here. Oh, look, there we are. That looks just like us.
On a good day.
So, you know, thank you for the intro, Kate and Allison. You know, you've given enough background, I think, to give a sense of who we are and where we came from. Okie boy, New York City girl, you know, both ended up in the city, but moved out here out west to this beautiful high desert landscape of Santa Fe, New Mexico, where one of the #1 art markets in the world is in our backyard. Santa Fe has over 100 galleries and museums that are open year-round, and it has become a mecca for art and art enthusiasts. As it was mentioned, my background was in graphic designs and graphic arts, and that led to paper making, 2D design and printmaking. And I've had a long relationship with paper as a kid, as a student, and then professionally as an artist. And to me, this was a fragile thing for what I wanted to do, is have what I call deep time conversation with my ancestors and with humanity in the form of art history. And that was why that trip to Greece was so profound for me. I encountered thousands of year-old objects that were really carrying a voice that spoke to me. And I wanted to engage in that conversation, that dialogue. I was inspired so much by that experience that I came back to New York and changed my major to fine art, and quickly realized that if I was going to have work of antiquity in that sort of form, paper was no way the material to endure that sort of legacy. So I switched to sculpture and started studying bronze casting. It's a 6,000-year-old process. We use very similar techniques today that were used 6,000 years ago. There's been some advancements, but basically it's a similar process. I like to call it a very simple 35-step, 12-week process. And I'm not going to explain it all to you here today because it is really labor intensive and there are a lot of steps involved in it. But the pioneered process that I took to sort of adjust and adapt that technique to paper was unique. And when I was working at the foundries, I had access to the full studio. I had access to other artists and their insights and their experience, and I was able to pick their brains and experiment with the process in ways that I could afford to fail. It's a very expensive process, and the only way I felt I had access was to actually work in the foundry. And one of the best things I did in my career was I became proficient at this and was promoted to production manager at one point of a large foundry, one of the largest foundries in Texas. And in that moment, I got offered a raise. And I said, look, I don't want a raise. I still can barely afford to cast my own work. It was $8 a pound to pour bronze as an employee, and I made $8 an hour. So you can imagine how quickly and how heavy that can translate into zero pay. So they negotiated and agreed to that, and it really released me into the freedom of exploration and experimentation with failure, because there was a lot of failure early on. On the left of the screen, you'll see this sort of mandala, and this is a rectangle, but the vast majority of the early works that I did were square, primarily because my last name is Box, and I was taught in marketing and graphic design, use it if you got it. That idea of starting with a square piece of paper and just folding it lent itself to these natural mandala forms that emerged from the paper. And with my name Box and the meditation on sort of spiritual history, I wanted to describe the architecture of the soul. That's really where I was going philosophically and artistically. How do I describe the mathematics of the universe? What does E equals MC squared look like in the sort of spiritual reality of the universe? And what do our thoughts and our feelings look like? And to me, these mandalas, these creases and crinkles had a visual language that really engaged me in that. I was also experimenting with how paper obviously would be cast, but as a sculptor, I knew that this could also potentially be fabricated, and which is another sculptural technique where we take a sheet of metal and we cut it into shapes and weld it back together. Because origami obviously in paper begins as a flat sheet, it was obvious to me at the time that this would lend itself towards the fabrication process. And on the right, you see this piece is a blank piece of paper turning into a paper airplane called folding planes. And that was one of my first experiments with fabrication of metal. The first profound experience I had with origami was when I displayed that early work, the sort of abstract stars and things. People just kept coming up to me going, that's a lot like origami. And wow, that's like origami. Oh, cool. Is that origami? And I just heard origami like all day long. And I was like, no, it's this profound spiritual thing about the architecture of the soul. And, it's contemporary art. And I was kind of trying to be, something that I had seen in New York City. And, but what I realized is, people have honest responses. And I thought, I'm going to stopped resisting this and sort of embrace it. And finally, somebody gave me an origami book, and it was The Story of 1,000 Cranes. And in art history, which is, again, this profound influence on my life, it's been around for 30,000 years or more, that humans have been creating and expressing and communicating through objects. And in art history class, we learned about archetypes. The word archetype and the idea of an archetype is a symbol. It's like a white dove. All over the world, different cultures, whether they share communication or the same religion or language or not, you could ask almost any culture in the world, what does a white bird symbolize in your community and in your culture? And many, many, many of them overlap to tell a similar story about peace, tranquility, the spiritual flutter of the soul within us that is hidden. This idea of a symbol that crosses cultural boundaries is not unique. So we like to call that an archetype. And I recognized in the story of 1,000 cranes, in this ancient origami tradition of folding 1,000 origami doves, that there was an archetype. There was that white bird. So that intrigued me, and I thought, well, I resonate with that. So I learned to fold this bird through a very difficult one-on-one experience with a book that I, like I said, somebody gave me, but I persevered and figured out how to fold an origami crane through the step-by-step process. But I still wasn't quite 100% engaged. It was like, I like this, it's interesting, but maybe there's something more there if I deconstruct it. And I began to unfold the crane. And when I unfolded the crane, I discovered this beautiful star that you can see on the wall of this slide. That is what's called the crease pattern. It is the unfolded design beneath the surface of the crane. And as you can see, how this relates to that earlier work of these sort of square mandalas that I was creating, it was an aha moment to me of, wow, maybe I am doing origami. I'm just doing the inside of origami, the hidden aspects of it. And what I loved about that is I discovered that origami can tell a very simple story of metaphor, that it can describe what we see with our eyes. It can describe what we see in nature. And when it's unfolded, it displays this beautiful, complex star that represents the invisible, what we can't see. So here we have this simple origami horse, and when it's unfolded, there's that beautiful star. And I encountered that over and over again. And so that really began my embracing journey with origami, to tell this story about how, in my philosophy, we are all made of stardust, and we are animated by this light, this star within each of us. And whether it's a plant or a tree or a boat or a plane or a horse or whatever, like there's all of this aspect of that we cannot see, the invisible meaning of life. And I can tell both of those stories with origami. So I began doing this work on larger scale. We started exhibiting in galleries and traveling to do shows around the country in galleries and art fairs. This is a show in Dallas, Texas. A lot of different materials were being experimented. I went from just using bronze to casting in aluminum and stainless steel, which all work in the lost wax process of ceramic shell technology. You can see these big pieces of paper on the wall. Those are cast aluminum. These can be displayed indoors or out. They can withstand the duration of time and touch. And I use aluminum on the wall because it's lightweight. It makes sense. You don't want to hang a 500-pound thing on the wall. I also began to work with stainless steel, which is a much stronger metal. You can see the scissors in this stone paper scissors in the picture are cast stainless steel. And we began to powder coat, which is an even more durable finish of the white. Being able to get delicate things in the air like that was a really profound evolution. And galleries and collectors around the country began to respond to this work. We started doing more and more public art. This is the gallery in Santa Fe. And an article that was written, K Contemporary Gallery in Santa Fe is on Canyon Road, this area with 100 galleries in a row. They've been our top selling gallery location for over 12 years, which is just a tremendous feat. And it's a wonderful thing to have them close to us. And they really, private collectors and these public art commissions are really what fueled the development of Origami in the Garden. As naturally as the artist, I was creating, different works and different scales. Jennifer and I began to realize, we have this collection that emerged after about 10 years. and the scale was getting larger, and we started to think, hey, maybe we could do a traveling exhibition, not just for, you know, art galleries and museums, but the botanical gardens. And I grew up spending summers in Atlanta visiting these fabulous sculpture exhibitions, and I really thought, you know, maybe there's a place with a different audience. You know, not everybody goes into galleries or museums, and I wanted to do public art, and it really wasn't engaging the broader audience that I wanted. Jennifer was a school teacher and worked in education, and she was losing that connection with just everyday people and kids at different ages. And so we were doing this show in Chicago at Navy Pier, and it's a really high-end fine art fair, right? And on Friday, they bust in all the high school kids, and all the dealers left the building. It was like everybody just left because they were like, well, these kids aren't going to buy anything, you know, they're not our audience. And Jennifer and I were like, this is great. And I mean, the booth filled with all these high school kids that absolutely loved the work and what we were doing, and we were engaging with them. And we thought, you know, see, here's our audience. It's not all about selling art, it's about selling inspiration. And we believe inspiration is something that we need to experience every day, you know, to inspire or be inspired, not necessarily in that order. That's our philosophy.
And we got to enjoy it just as much as those kids. You know, it was a different kind of audience, and it was really enjoying.
And that's when it hit. It was like, okay, like we got to figure out how to readjust this. So we moved out and built this home in Santa Fe, about 10 miles south of town, on this beautiful, fabulous property that's 35 acres. We have a sculpture garden out front. We built this custom home and studio, and we began to really grow these ideas, both in the gardens and in the galleries, as well as this idea of building a botanical garden show. We do limited edition work, so there's a limited series of every sculpture that we make, and we sort of facilitate and move all of this inventory through our studio here to the galleries and collectors around the country. And we started building bigger and bigger pieces, and I started to think, what if we really were going to build this botanical garden show, what's missing? Like, what do we need? What story do I think's missing from Origami in the Garden, if we were to call it that? And so we started building these larger pieces. So you can see here me doing the painting on Botanical Piece, which is right out front of
the entrance,
the visitor center at Missouri Botanical Garden. Now, it tells the story of, you know, divine nature and the harmony and the way nature collaborates and works together. And so I wanted to talk about origami paper that was, you know, multicolored and patterned. So that was a fun opportunity to do that. We finished the works here. Even if we work with subcontractors, fabricators, or foundries, a lot of times that work comes back to the studio 90% finished, or to the degree that they can do it, and we'll do the very final finishing touches. And that's an important part for me as the artist, you know, to actually make sure it really is capturing the vision that I want to have in it. Jennifer manages all this. Here we are in the office. Administration literally is 50% of the job. It's no joke. And I would have never been able to arrive or reach this sort of level of production and ambition with what we wanted to do without having her as a team.
Fortunately, we were able to grow our team as well. So when we wanted to have the sculpture garden in our front, we like to call it our front yard, we were able to start hiring some staff to do some tours, just like at the docents at the botanical gardens, sort of as a test market, right?
Yeah, so we like to call it our laboratory. You know, it's like our experiment. We've started practicing having large scale shows in our own front yard. And for 5 summers, we've been open to the public. We're not currently open now for some obvious reasons, but we started practicing. How do we make this show more enriching with tours and interpretive copy? We have an audio tour that people can call and listen to me and some of the artists tell stories. And we do live in a very spectacular geological formation known as the Little Garden of the Gods. And we wanted to give people access to sort of see some of the beauty of New Mexico and our landscape, these rock formations, as well as art in juxtaposition. And this is in some ways what botanical gardens are doing around the country now, with bringing sculpture exhibitions into their gardens. So we did it. In 2013, we cast Masterpiece. It was the 1,000 cranes that I had originally been introduced to. We created one sculpture of 1,000 cranes, 500 in the monument, 500 scattered abroad to collectors to help us raise the funds to build it. But they're all together in that beautiful reflection that you can see in the pond outside the
Climatron.
Thanks. We collaborate with other artists. This is not, I'm kind of the lead singer in the band, but we have a great team of people besides my fabrication and Jennifer's administrative staff. TJ Fu was the first origami artist that I collaborated with. He's a Chinese artist out of Houston. I thought, I'm great at all this metal work and transforming paper into metal, but it's a very simple 35-step, 12-week process. It goes on and on and on. How am I ever going to become an origami master at the same time? So inspired by my favorite musical groups, I thought, I'm not going to try. I'm just going to call the best guitar player I know, find a great drummer, sort of bring them in and see if they want to play. And it's been a really successful collaboration of working together. So TJ Fu and I created the pony together. This was our first collaboration. It was also the first time I tried some other color than white. There's a lot of white in this show, and I know a lot of people ask, like, why so much? But nothing says paper outdoors as much as white. And it is the archetypal symbol of paper, if you ask me. But I wanted to try a different color. And in China, the red horse is like a really powerful symbol. And so we thought, well, we'll try some different colors and see if it translates. I think this young boy would agree that it was a success. And I just want to say that on the back of that pony is our collaborative signature. TJ Fu's last name, Fu, literally translates to teacher or tutor in English. And so that's his signature, his last name in the center there. I've had some folks that speak and write Chinese question that. And I say, you can take it up with his mother because it was how she wrote it. And then my last name is Box, which is the shape around that, obviously. Robert Lang is literally world renowned as probably one of the greatest origami masters of the world that we've seen yet. There are kids today that are going to surpass him. We are encouraging and hopeful of that in every avenue of profession. But Robert really is what I call the sort of the Yoda of the origami community. He is a PhD physicist, and that mathematical mind and engineering background really enabled him to take simple origami that he'd been folding and exhausted all the books that he had gotten as a kid, and developed and pioneered new folding techniques using mathematics that truly transformed what's possible with a single uncut square of paper. And he wrote a computer program called Tree Maker and outsourced it to the world to help people understand how to pack more detail into a single uncut square. And that really did revolutionize the global scope of what was possible. We think of origami as an Asian art form, and it is traditionally from Asia, just as paper was invented there 200 BC, give or take. Of course, origami came from that, but it traveled as soon as paper went into Europe and South America and different places. Origami, the natural response is to fold it. Well, he did that with this, the technique of folding, and people in the last 40 years have truly taken on the complexity of origami and the challenge worldwide. So the first example of origami that we ever created was the white buffalo, or the white bison as it's called. I grew up in Oklahoma, and I wanted to incorporate other symbols of peace, other cultural symbols of peace into this exhibition, so that it wasn't just solely an Asian sort of theme. And the white bison was a very sacred animal in Oklahoma and I grew up hearing these stories. Robert thought, and I didn't know this, but this was our first collaboration. So he flew out to Santa Fe to work on this project. And he thought, well, a buffalo, it's not going to be that difficult. So he brought Duogami paper to the studio. Duogami is where you start with a single uncut square of paper, but it's white on one side and another color on the other, or two colors. It can be any combination. In this case, it was white and silver. And he engineered the fold so that the back side of the bison would show one side of the paper, while the front showed the other side of the paper, except for the eyes and the horns. This blew me away whenever I first realized what he was doing and saw the color change. And it really impressed me, and I wanted to carry that inspiration over. And you'll see this example used in a lot of pieces in the garden, such as the squirrel and other things. So if you see an origami design and there's two colors, we didn't just randomly, pick something and choose that. It's often authentic to the Duogami artistry of the artist involved.
If you didn't see, you should go back to the garden and check it out because it's pretty amazing just seeing the little eyes and the horns popping out.
Another great example of work that was already in Robert's portfolio is this Origami Crane. I mean, the traditional Origami Crane that we've all seen is an impressive and simplified, beautiful display of, sort of a symbol of an origami crane. But to see what Robert has been able to evolve and develop within his folding pattern, this is still a single uncut square. It's still the same subject matter of a crane, which is known in the world to mate for life and fly and migrate these enormous lengths. But look at the feathers. Next time you're up near that, check out the toes. There's 3 toes on every leg, on each leg. And in the visitor center, we brought an actual origami model that Robert folded, the original fold, which is just a tremendous thing to have there in the visitor center for people to see an example of the actual folded paper original. Michael LaFosse was the third origami artist that I began to collaborate with. And one of the reasons I wanted to work with him and reached out is because he's one of the only origami masters in the world that makes the paper that he folds. So early on, when he couldn't get paper to do the complexity of detail that he was trying to achieve with his own design work, he realized, I'm just going to have to make my own. And true to a great artist spirit, he was unintimidated by that and just went right into it. I wanted Michael to be in this exhibit because origami is made from paper and paper is made from plants. In a lot of ways that ties in the Botanical Garden's mission and our mission to inspire and grow people and consciousness through education and inspiration. And the idea that origami in the garden is actually in a roundabout way, seeing origami in its natural habitat. Some of the great paper making plants of the world can be found in the collection at the Missouri Botanical Garden. And so we began collaborating for a number of reasons. He's also world renowned for his butterfly designs. And of all the different things that he's invented, this origami butterfly he designed and invented especially for Jennifer and I for Origami in the Garden. And this piece was commissioned by the Naples Botanical Garden, which we unveiled in 2016. We wanted to tell the story of the life cycle of the butterfly and the metamorphosis. And there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for enlightenment and education within this sculpture, especially with regard to imaginal cells and the transformation that happens within the pause of the pupa, from the economy of the caterpillar to the pollination of the butterfly. Please check into the audio tour or some of the writings that we have about this to be more inspired. Another piece that we did together was the squirrel, what we call seed sower. And this was commissioned by the Morton Arboretum in 2018, I believe. They 17, 18. They obviously have a big passion for trees, and they also wanted to introduce a new piece with their exhibition. And so what better collaboration of nature and trees to talk about than the squirrel? Because the squirrel, as you know, takes these little acorns and it's both living around the tree, it has habitat and shelter, but it also gets food. And the tree benefits because an oak tree cannot grow beneath itself. It has to spread beyond its branches to really move out. And so as we know, the acorns are taken by the squirrel and they're buried all over the place. And thanks to nature and the maker, squirrels don't have a perfect memory. So they'll forget where all those were. And one of them will pop up as a wonderful tree. Which brings us to Beth Johnson. We brought her on to Origami in the Garden at the same time as we did the squirrel to collaborate because I was Googling origami acorns because I thought, we got to have a really good one. And there was none other more famous than Beth. And she's a really innovative designer. She thinks outside the box, which I got to love it. And she's not afraid to use scissors or computers or a different shape of paper. She does step outside the uncut square to design really innovative and wonderful works. And so she's a really wonderful person. She's an educator and a great designer, and she designed this acorn using 2 pieces of paper. So this is called modular origami. When you have 2 pieces of paper, this is not duogami, not to be confused with duogami, modular. So the top of the acorn is made from one piece of paper and the bottom is made from another. And these complex curves, these beautiful soft curves that you see on the bottom of the acorn are done using computer-aided drafting, because those lines are mathematically perfect. And if you don't fold them on that perfect line, it will not form its perfect shape. And so her employment of computer-aided drawing and drafting, influenced by Robert Lang's early work, enables her to design some of the neat and beautiful forms that she works with today. My wife, Jennifer, no less, is a collaborator in so many ways that I can't even describe to you. We've been married for 15 years. We worked together full-time for 12. Put that together, and in dog years, it's got to be 50 by now. I don't know. We don't get a lot of break from one another, but thank God we like each other a lot. We're tolerant, we work hard, and we have good goals.
Have you ever seen this photo?
No, it's a
It's a
beautiful
brand new photo. This is at Missouri Botanical Garden. Isn't it beautiful?
So in the Climatron, there are two pieces that are collaborations with Jennifer and I. We built this home in 2000. We finished it in 2012. And through that process, we learned a lot about each other, about the process, and about compromise. And so naturally out of this, I was in the studio, which wasn't here at the time, sort of thinking and being inspired by life, going, we're just like two birds making a nest. Like, we got to work together. We got to get along together. And as I'd mentioned before, the Origami crane, the traditional crane, is inspired by a real bird of nature that is known to mate for life. And that is our goal as a married couple. And it's not a goal that will be achieved until the day we die, but we're working at it every day. And so this piece was inspired by that relationship in nature. And anytime you see two birds getting along, making a nest out of olive branches, which is also a Greek symbol of harmony and compromise, that's usually a symbol that Jennifer and I are working together. So we've got a couple things like that in the show. Some things that we encountered along the way, we've done, I think we were counting it up yesterday,
14
to 16 exhibitions now with botanical gardens around the country and the Origami in the Garden model. And every single garden brings something absolutely fantastic as a rich response to what we've been doing. Because we didn't invent origami, it's been around. People have been playing and working with it and looking for that opportunity to show off something or share something wonderful that they've developed. This is a ceiling display of hanging flowers that was done in Tucson Botanical Gardens. You don't see it in here, but these just absolutely effortlessly moved with the slightest winds. When you walked through this corridor, you just had this huge canopy. We've seen umbrellas, the parasols, the paper Japanese parasols hanging. We've seen origami displays by community members that have just been absolutely outstanding. People painting origami in the garden, people photographing origami in the garden. The community involvement has really enriched our lives and our experience with origami, but we know the botanical gardens themselves have really found great luck with this. Robert Lang and Michael G. LaFosse are well-known publishers. They have published over 100 books between the two of them. So people have encountered their books. They can encounter them in the libraries. They can learn how to fold some of these things. People from beginner level to this young boy with a grin on his face was probably one of the biggest Robert Lang fans I've ever met. He was so excited to see Origami in the Garden come to his garden. This is at Lewis Genter. The thing we love about the botanical gardens is the educational programming. They have teams of staff members. They have grants to bus in kids and really bring people into contact with the inspiration and the possibilities of origami in the garden. So educational tours are real important. Jennifer's been great about codifying some of the storytelling and the educational programming so that it's easy for botanical gardens to uptick our information and integrate it with programs that already have in place. And then gift shop, we've got something for everybody. Obviously fine art, and when we cast bronze, it's expensive. That very simple 35-step 12-week process has a lot of dollar signs associated with it along the way. And we wanted to get rid of that, it's for sale idea and just let people enjoy it and be inspired by it. And so having a few small accessible things like t-shirts and cups and small bronze castings, little open editions have really been fun for people to be able to take a little piece home, put it into their own art collection or share it with their community in a different way. It's been really successful. And I know Missouri Botanical Garden's got a great gift shop there with a great staff doing a great job. The festivals are returning. These are some of the great botanical garden events that are going to be happening in Missouri. And I know they've got a better display of these on their website, but it's really cool to see the cultural engagement and the different way that the communities can come in and show off their relationship with these things and see what their inspiration has. The Pegasus is the last piece. This is a Greek, back to my life-changing moment in Greece, the hero's horse. This is such a cool installation at your garden, because right across the way, if you'll notice in the shadows, is this beautiful Jacques Lipschitz sculpture of Pegasus as well. And it has the same interpretive copy that I would and that we carry along, because to me, everyone knows it's a Pegasus. But the reason I call it a hero's horse is I want to draw your attention to the hero, the spirit of the hero. What does that mean? Where do we see that in our culture and in our lives? And how do we engage that and become that ourselves? The great legend and the myth of the Pegasus speaks about a hero trying to save the world and up against insurmountable odds to overcome evil with the peace and the authenticity of the spirit of humanity. And this unsurmountable beast was on the land, and with great prayer and want, the gods or the divine nature delivered this winged white horse, and the hero was able to ride the Pegasus and go slay the dragon or overcome evil, whatever it was, and remain victorious. And I think that we all have to find that opportunity within ourselves. What do we have to overcome? And when we have the authenticity of heart, help will arrive, whether it's through people or nature or divine circumstance or coincidence, whatever you want to call it. It's there. And I found it in my career and in my life, and I see it around the world. And we've been told these stories for thousands and thousands of years. So it's a great piece for me. It's a personal favorite.
And where does he return? That's my favorite part.
Yeah. So at the end of the story, nobody's ever seen a real Pegasus, right? Nobody here can say that they've
Not
been
yet.
to the zoo and seen the Pegasus in the zoo. And that's because at the end of the story, this is clarified. The Pegasus, after completing this mission, returns to the stars, returns to heaven, and unfolds into the constellation of Pegasus that we can still see in the night sky today. And in the visitor center, you'll see the Pegasus and the unfolded Pegasus on the wall, the star of the hero's horse, which shows the beauty and the complexity beneath the surface. So with that, I'm going to conclude my general tour and experience here, but we want to open it up to questions. If anybody has something for me or for Jennifer, my beloved bride here, or even for the garden, let us know. What do you got?
Yeah, well, we've got a couple coming in, but folks feel free to just use the Q&A function and type questions. We'll take them for a few minutes. So one question I have is talk a little bit, because I have to admit I'm working remotely and in the office sometimes, so I didn't see all of that happen, but talk a little bit about moving the pieces from garden to garden and then the installation process. What's involved? What's hard about that? I can't imagine it's too easy.
Good question. That would have been something we could have slid in there with the slides. I bet you on your website, you might have some of the time-lapse videos that we took. It's no joke. Jennifer, when she came on to work with me, one of the first things she pointed out is, people want free shipping. She's like, you cannot give this away anymore. Like, this is expensive. It costs a lot. You're spending 30% of our time, energy, and effort just moving sculpture around. It's a complicated thing, whether it's small or large. One of the things that I've done is made origami as durable as possible. I've transformed it into metal, but I've also used metal in ways that are very fragile and bringing them into the sort of finest potential. So it's really something that we have to be careful with. We have special equipment. I think you may have seen the crane truck when I walked by outside. You saw our studio with these big overhead cranes. These things are heavy. They're sharp and pointy. We have to be careful. And then a lot of times we'll crate them and put them in boxes and things so that we can cart them around.
Yeah, give a visual of a 53-foot long tractor trailer filled like 3 high strapped down, and it takes a day. You load it one day, and of course when we get to the garden you have to unload it. Heavy equipment. And yes, we did definitely take some video of the installation, but big crane's masterpiece being installed. I mean, we had to use this huge crane truck that basically had to fit into this little spot. And so it takes a team. It's by no means us just like, and it's done. That does not happen.
You could almost say it's a very simple 35-step 12-week process in addition to the other one we worked
So
with.
we're up
There's
to
nothing
70 steps.
Yeah,
Well, talk
it's
about a little bit, it's funny you mentioned the process. Talk a little bit more about, I know we don't want to go into every 35 steps of the process, but really the process of turning that paper into origami. What are the first steps you do? And then how does it, eventually get cast and then completed? Just a little bit more detail about that.
Well, turning paper into origami, I'm not sure if that's what you meant to ask there, but that would be a Robert Lang.
Paper origami into sculptures.
Okay. Well, I will say that there's another, vast and intense process with that. These artists have spent their lives pioneering and developing the folding techniques to blow us away with what's achievable.
And then to have to work with us, and they'll send in a model, and we think, well, what if it was just a little bit more like this? And so there's a lot of back and forth in that process first. But then when Kevin finally gets that, they agree on what the model is going to look like, he has to work with the paper model.
So I add wax, that molten wax that I showed you. The paper, lost wax casting has rules. Okay, molten metal has to be at a certain temperature. It can flow through certain thinness, it can only be so thin, and it can only be so thick. And so all these rules are what I sort of learned about in the process of working on a foundry. And so what I'm doing is adding the wax to the paper, to maintain as much of the paper surface as possible. So most of the time the wax is just on the back side of the paper, but then we can't have voids or undercuts or areas that just go into nothing. So I have to fill them with, and I use the wax to do that. The wax has to be used to thicken certain parts of, obviously, like an origami paper bird, the wings seem thin. So I'm having to achieve a very specific thickness there, and to make sure that not only will the rubber mold work, but the molten metal will flow. So once that model is done, and that's really the pioneering expertise that I developed, and why I say it's engineering the paper into the process, knowing what's going to work. I have to say, in all 20 years, I've had one piece fail where the foundry said, it's not working, you have to redo the model. I've only had to go back once. But once the model is done, we make a rubber mold that we cover the model in rubber, and that creates a female copy, so to speak. We put plaster or fiberglass around the rubber because it's floppy. We have to hold the rubber in its shape so that we can take the rubber apart and remove the original. And then we put the mold back together and pour molten wax into the rubber mold, and then we slush it around, and that's how we make a positive copy, or a one-to-one copy of the original paper model. That then sometimes gets cut into pieces, sometimes it's cast in one piece, most of the time it's cast in numerous pieces. It gets gated and sprued with other wax engineered devices that then gets dipped in ceramic shell. It takes about 14 days or 14 layers of ceramic. But when that ceramic gets fired, that's why we call it lost wax. When you fire the ceramic shell, it becomes like a porcelain cup, like your coffee cup. And the wax melts away, and that void where you pour your coffee is what we're going to pour molten metal into. And it can withstand the heat of the coffee or the metal. And then whenever that metal cools down, we break the ceramic shell away. So that's a one-time use mold, whereas the rubber is you can use it over and over again. That's how we make the limited editions. But that ceramic breaks away. If there's any mistake between the wax and the ceramic at that point, you go back to the mold and start over again. Once that's broken away, we have a bronze copy that's the same shape inside your coffee cup, as the original model was. We can then weld the different pieces back together. We have to chase and remove the welds to hide them. We don't want you to see the process, and then paint or patina or finish the work to look like whatever the artist wants. In my case, I want it to look like paper. And then there's one final moment here that when I first make the piece white, it doesn't look like paper. And I tried this. I took the work on display, and people wondered, they wanted to touch it. They're like, is that ceramic Or is that
Yeah.
plaster? What is that made out of? And it was like the mind and the eye were not connecting the dots about this is paper. So I dirty it with dirt. I actually use raw sienna, which is a dirt from Italy, mixed with wax. And I rub it all over the edges and the crinkles and the wrinkles and the creases to sort of create a little bit more contrast. And I call it the parchment patina, because what I discovered is that it absolutely magically changes the perception from our eye tells our brain, oh, it's paper. And immediately people think, oh, wow, it's paper. But some people have asked, like, what is that sort of dirty color on there? Is it rusting? Like, what is that? And it's just a little nuance to make it come off as paper.
Yeah, that's incredible. And how do you choose what metals you're going to work with for do you know that at the beginning, or is that something you kind of figure out as you go?
So in the design studio, as I said, we sort of start and finish everything here. In the beginning phases, that's my job, is to analyze this and really look at it, deconstruct it if necessary. Depends on the size of the work. What's the application? Is it going to go on a temporary show in a garden where I want it to be lightweight? So we use aluminum primarily for wall hanging pieces because it's lightweight. It's also a white metal, so it doesn't want to oxidize or change colors. So when we paint it or coat it, it's very durable and long lasting. But I don't typically use aluminum for like big objects unless we're trying to get a big heavy object into a botanical garden temporarily. So like those big origami bison that you all have there are aluminum because it's a big thing and we're just trying to reduce the weight for temporary exhibition. Bronze is still used for mostly sticks and twigs and some thin or really delicate or difficult castings that the foundry is challenged by, where bronze is just an easier metal to work with. Aluminum melts at 1,000 degrees. That's not that hot. Bronze is 2,000 degrees, which is very hot. Stainless steel melts at 3,000 degrees is what we're pouring at. So it's literally as bright as the sun. You have to wear sunglasses to pour this stuff. But they all get poured into the same ceramic shell, and the stainless is very strong, but it's also very hard. So it takes longer to chase it. It takes longer to grind it.
That's how you can weld like two birds together in stainless steel and know it's durable and going to stay there versus bronze, which could fold and bend a little bit.
Yeah, bronze is 98% copper, so it's really soft. So for example, in that entry, you have the cranes, the rising cranes coming out of that fountain. Those are all these beautiful, delicate cranes, but they're cast in stainless steel. And that's what enables those little points to be welded together and hold each other up and not be bent every time we handle it or move it around.
That's great. That's really interesting. So other than your front yard, do you have any permanent installations anywhere?
We do. We have about 20 public art installations around the country.
And I have to say that we're working on a website right now through another platform. It's Wescover, WESCOVER. They have a map that we're able to utilize and put all of our public art. So it's, obviously it's always going to be a continuous need to update it. But right now, that's where we're putting sort of our public art. So you can catch a glimpse of it. If you're, doing some road trips, you can try to find some of them.
A dream come true for me would to have a permanent piece in City Garden. That's one of the most profoundly controversial and wonderful displays of public art I've ever seen. The fact that people are welcome to
the touch points,
to jump on it, and they're swimming in the pools. The first time we went there, I was blown away. And
it's fantastic.
I'd love to have a piece in permanent collections like that. We have a few here and there over the years.
Well, and I know we got the question if we'll have a piece stay permanently with us. I don't know the answer to that yet. The exhibition's on view through October, so a lot could happen. Obviously, we have many sculptures from past exhibits, sort of our scrapbook of a collection, but hopefully,
hope the best of the best, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, like I said, we have till October. So you mentioned the website with the public art, but can you remind people, we did have a question if they want to learn more, what is your specific website? I know they can always link to it from mobot.org, but what's your website to learn more and see more about your space in Santa Fe? And when it does open, if somebody's interested in visiting.
We have two websites and they lead you to each one of them. So OutsideTheBoxStudio.com. One more time, OutsideTheBoxStudio.com. And then you can use OrigamiintheGarden.com.
Great.
So OrigamiintheGarden.com will let you know when we plan on opening. It probably will be in 2023 because we have so many exhibitions going on and building the new show as well, that basically there's not going to be that much excitement out front for a little bit. So we're trying to, and keep visitorship a little bit lower here. But then after 2023, OrigamiintheGarden.com will let you know our hours here and when we're open, as well as where we're touring in the future.
Fantastic. And then a final question for both of you, because it might not be the same answer. I know this is a hard one, and I'm sure you're asked all the time. Pick a favorite piece. Hey, I didn't ask it. Somebody did, but I know that's like picking your favorite child, or in my case, pet.
It kind of changes, and I'll say this one specifically for Missouri Botanical Garden. I really like Light Boat, and it's kind of a on the side. In fact, I had a conversation with someone on social media where she was like, "I didn't see this piece. Where is this piece?" And I let her know, and she went back to the garden. She goes, "I got so busy, and I didn't get to see it." She had to see, go back into the garden a third time to see it. She finally wrote back, "I got to see it." I think the placement of it in trees and grass, it's just different, and it just catches me off guard. So I really like it placed there. And I've liked that piece in the desert. It's been in different locations, obviously. So I like the way that piece changes for me.
And I'll let people know that is in our daylily garden. So here soon, a little later in summer, when our daylilies are all blooming, that'll give it even more life. But
take photos and send them to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kevin, what about you?
Well, I have to say, Crane Unfolding is like my swan song. It was like right in the beginning, but it's such a self-portrait, and it tells all the stories that I want in one piece. But the Pegasus captured in Hero's Horse, it took it to another scale. That piece transitioned from a paper model that Robert Lang and I really collaborated to create together from scratch through unique circumstances. It went into one-to-one casting, and then into the development into fabrication. It won a fabrication award from the Structural Engineers Association of California for one of the best structurally engineered. The fact that we proved origami has a structural quality that works in paper and metal on a large scale, it just hits on like every cylinder for me. The fact that the unfolded mandala is so profoundly beautiful and spiritually meaningful to me, to see that beautiful complex thing beneath the surface and how it unfolds, and you can find the wings in the corners, and you can sort of discover different details of the Pegasus. It's just an impressive and incredible thing that I still find engaging. And I'm working on an 18-footer right now in stainless steel. It's been a whole nother challenge, and it's just such a cool piece. I love it at every scale. I love the little tiny miniature all the way up to the big ones.
Yep. And for folks visiting, that is near the Climatron. So right as you head down to the newly reopened Children's Garden, you'll see that there. It is a great piece. Well, I think we are right at noon, so we're about out of time, but I just have to thank you again. This has been a long conversation coming. We had planned to do this in, I think, April of 2020, and but this way we were able to see your studio, and it was just
right on time.
Yes, well done, guys. But again, thank you. As a reminder, everybody, Origami After Hours begins tonight, every Thursday and Friday through the end of the summer. And then the exhibition itself will be on view through early October. You guys gave us a fantastic plug that our festivals, our weekend festivals, will be back. And with Chinese Culture Days and Japanese Festival especially, we're so delighted to be able to have those and have origami at the same time. So they'll really add another layer of interpretation and activity to those festivals. So those will be here for that, and then we will deinstall in early October. Any final words from you guys before we head out?
I just want to say thank you to the staff really right now for the extended evenings. I know it puts, there's more staff to have to stay there and anything. So thank you so much for all that work, as well as all the way back to day one, working with everyone on the installation and citing the pieces so well with Jay and Chelsea and the entire team. It was a wonderful installation because it's such a wonderful team and garden to work with.
Well, thank you, and right back at you. Well, have a great day, and thank you, members. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you again on the June 22nd with our landscape architects and Andrew Wyatt, our Vice President of Horticulture, and then in July we'll have photographer Ian Shive. So I hope you can join us virtually for those. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. It's been
Bye.
an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.